Okay, so I'm back. Just wanted to answer a few questions actually that came up on the channel. I thought they were very good questions. My apologies that it's been a month since somebody asked these or more. But hey, we all have busy lives. And so I'm going to try to answer a few of these questions. The first one was regarding the B12 video I shot. I'm not going to read the long paragraph. Rather, I'll just allude to what was asked, which was essentially, in the face of consuming animal products, is it possible to still be deficient in B12? Absolutely yes. And in fact, more than just possible. I think the numbers are somewhere around 1 in 6. I'm getting that from the nutritionfacts.org website, and which is alluding to other research. 1 in 6 meat carnivorous people are deficient in B12. Now, I'm going to answer why that might be, because I think this is actually useful information to have. Mind you, there is a dog on my lap. Useful because, so one thing to keep in mind is that B12 does not directly come from the animal source itself. It's the flora and fauna in the GI tract of the animal and the bacteria there that are actually producing the B12. Even vegetarians, vegans, they make, well, I should say, we in our connectedness to all the bacteria that outnumber us, produce plenty of B12. It's just beyond the absorption site in the GI. And so this is the problem with being vegetarian, that, it goes out the poop chute. So short of a fecal transplant, you have to find another source. Sorry guys, I'm not that committed. Can't do that. But yeah, B12, you might also be deficient even if you're consuming animal products, because several possibilities. Number one, I hate to break it to you, those of you that live in the United States, our meat sources are a little subpar. So antibiotics pumped into those cows, hormones, they're consuming corn, which is not what they're used to consuming. They're supposed to actually eat grass. This has an effect on, number one, their health. So sometimes you have the diabetic cow with the cardiovascular disease. That seems very American. And you consume it, and then you wind up diabetic with cardiovascular disease. Huh. It could take rocket science to figure this one out, guys. So, basically, the other issue would be the cows, the animal products that we are consuming. If they have GI issues, let's say their flora and fauna is a little thrown off, and we know antibiotics actually do this. Antibiotics can shake out the gut 6-12 months out. The flora and fauna are not reestablished like they need to be. That's in the research. I'm not gonna link to it, but I know that's out there. That even months after having one antibiotic, you can still have the gut be totally off. Meaning not enough biodiversity. Essentially, that's one of the problems. So if you have that situation going on in a cow that you're then utilizing as a meat source, it might be that their flora and fauna got wiped out with the bacteria, with the antibiotic that they were given on the feedlot, and therefore they have no B12. No surprise there. So that's one scenario. A second scenario, D Duffy 60, would be if you personally have any GI issues, that could also be affecting the problem. So if you've had gastric bypass surgery, any kind of irritable bowel disease, so IBS, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's, celiacs, even hydrochlorhydria, which is like hypochlorhydria, would be low acid secretion in the stomach. Part of the absorption of B12 occurs when you secrete intrinsic factor, which then later down the GI tract helps you absorb the B12. If you don't have the intrinsic factor, you have issues. So if you've had anything that disrupted your stomach, not just where you actually absorb in the lumen of I think it's the end of the small intestine, then you end up with you may not absorb, even if you have no issues at that part of the GI. So the whole thing needs to be functioning fairly well for good absorption of B12. So that could be another issue if that was happening to the cow you consume, or that was happening to you personally. Either of those scenarios would affect your B12. You mentioned also in your post that you had your spleen taken out, splenectomy. And we're wondering, I think, if that was the correlation, if that was the factor for why you now are having issues. You said on blood studies you're having issues with blood cell counts. I'm assuming you're alluding to red blood cell counts. Could be either, though, white blood cells or red blood cells. But B12 has more to do with red blood cells. And it wouldn't be the spleen necessarily directly affecting that. The spleen, basically, the role is to filter the blood, and basically the white blood cells hang out in these caverns. And as the blood flows past, they chew up the old red blood cells. So they're looking for red blood cells that should be taken out of circulation because they're growing newfangled things. Or no, typically their lifespan is over. The average lifespan of a red blood cell is like 90 to 120 days. And so what happens is you take out the ones that are no longer carrying oxygen the way they ought to. And that's one of the jobs of the spleen. So my guess is that wouldn't necessarily, you could become anemic and have low red blood cells, not from your spleen being removed, rather more from the B12 deficiency. So addressing the B12 deficiency is likely to get you some traction on that issue, though consult your doctor, as you already have, and basically, but that's likely to be the main piece that's going on. So keep that in mind. Nice long post. Love reading your comments. Good luck to you. Hope it works out. B12. Like I said, if you have, let me rewind. If you have issues with absorption, one way to bypass that would be to just get B12 injections. So then you're avoiding this whole, am I going to absorb it? Do I have the right amount of intrinsic factor? You just B12 injection, however monthly or something like that, to kind of get your levels up. That might be useful. Or to supplement, with a liquid B12. That's what I do as a vegetarian. So, and then let's go on. BG had a question. BG wanted to know, how exactly do vitamins and minerals retain function of the HPA axis? Is it because they de-stress, which allows for recovery? Yes and no. Yes, having adequate levels of vitamins and minerals will help you de-stress, will help you weather all the stress that's hitting your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. But really the main reason to have vitamins and minerals is because, and typically this is across the board in the body, vitamins and minerals are used oftentimes, sometimes they're hooked on to things that you make that you need. So for example, thyroid hormone is made out of tyrosine, which is like an amino acid, and then you hook a bunch of iodine to it. There are like 4 spots that iodine parks on it. So if you have an iodine deficiency, you end up not being able to make thyroid hormone, which regulates a lot of your metabolism in the body. So that's kind of important. But you have a lot of times vitamins and minerals function like cofactors. So what that means is if you have a metabolic chemical reaction that happens in cell X, then to make that run, you often have enzymes, which are basically just proteins that speed up the reaction and make sure these two things collide that need to collide and have the reaction happen. Oftentimes, vitamins function as cofactors with those enzymes to make those reactions happen at the speed they need to. And if you're deficient in the vitamin, then it's kind of like the enzyme is handicapped, and it even though it can help speed up the reaction, it needs this vitamin. So basically, it works to make the reaction happen. So a lot of times that's the role of enzymes. But you have, basically chemical reactions are what make everything happen in the body. And so, for example, if you're detoxing something, you've got this chemical reaction where you hook things on and make it a less, like a phase 1 reaction where you're detoxifying whatever this is. Sometimes you actually make it more toxic in the process, weirdly enough. And so you end up hooking sometimes vitamins and minerals to change the molecule so it doesn't have the same reaction in the body. Sometimes, there are all sorts of ways that vitamins and minerals are used. That being said, when it comes to the HPA axis, we know some of these vitamins and minerals that are actually used based on, so for example, stress hormone, cortisol, in order to clear it from the body and put it into cortisone, you need vitamin C. And so you burn through vitamin C if you're processing a lot of cortisol, which destabilizes the HPA axis because you're under all this stress so you're making all this cortisol and you're trying to make the reaction, in order to get back to a normalized level, you want to clear the cortisol through the liver. Well, the liver needs vitamin C to do that. So you tend to use up more of your resources of vitamin C, and therefore, if you don't have enough vitamin C, there's going to be a bottleneck in the liver, and then that's going to have its deleterious effect on the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. So you're going to have this, right? You've already got things sort of wonky because you're under this chronic stress, and now you can't do what you need to do to bring things back into a normalized situation. So largely, just in a broad generalization, that would be the function of vitamins and minerals to help stabilize the HPA axis. I hope that answers your question. I hope that's both D, Defi, 60, and BG that you were asking those questions if I read them correctly. So thanks for tuning in. Appreciate all your support on the channel, and adios.